Okay, let's dive right into this. I want you to picture the scene. It's the freezing, bitter winter of 1464. Now, for over 1,000 years, the colossal stone walls of the castle we're looking at have watched kingdoms rise and violently collapse. They've repelled Viking longships, Norman knights, vicious Scottish warbands, you name it. To everyone who ever looked up at this massive volcanic rock, this fortress seemed less like something humans built and more like an unkillable, jagged extension of the earth itself. But on this dark, freezing winter day, an entirely new threat has arrived at the gates. This explainer is all about Bamburgh Castle, a place that has burned, bled, and somehow endured literally everything history could throw at it.
So the soldiers encamped outside in that frost-hardened mud are carrying the banner of the House of York. But here's the thing. They aren't carrying traditional ladders, and they aren't dragging those wooden battering rams. They have absolutely no intention of launching a siege that's going to slowly starve the defenders out over a few years. Instead, they've hauled massive, terrifying bronze cannons across the frozen fields. And as the very first shot shatters the dead silence of the Northumberland coast, ancient stone literally explodes into dust. In that single, deafening moment, the medieval world as they knew it ends, and a terrifyingly modern age begins.
Section 1. The Citadel of Bebbanburg, from Celtic rock to royal capital.
Now, to really grasp the immense gravity of that moment in 1464, we kinda have to flash back. Long before the English language even existed, starting way back in 420 AD as the Celtic fort Dingueri, this naturally unassailable rock was pretty much destined for empire. Celtic Britons chose this 150-foot volcanic basalt headland purely for its brutal natural defense. It rises straight out of the ground, surrounded by ocean and sheer drops. You don't build in a place like that because it's convenient, you build there because it's immovable. Then, in 547 AD, a warlord with the incredible name of Ida the Flamebearer seized the rock and made it his capital. His grandson later renamed it Bebbanburg, after his queen, Bebba. And for 2 centuries, this was the crown jewel of Northumbria, which was one of the most powerful kingdoms in the post-Roman world. It was this incredible golden age of scholars and illuminated manuscripts. But, as we know, golden ages expire. In 793 AD, the Vikings raided nearby Lindisfarne, sending absolute shockwaves through the Christian world. And then, in 993 AD, the Norsemen came for Bebbanburg itself. The chronicles from the time are just brutal. The great timber fortress was sacked, burned, and completely reduced to ash. That golden age? Gone.
Moving on to Section 2, the Norman stone fortress, anchoring the perilous north.
So from those Viking ashes, a totally new structure had to rise. Following the conquest of 1066, William the Conqueror and the Norman kings inherited a heavily fractured land, not to mention a constantly bleeding northern border with Scotland. They needed an anchor, a fortress that absolutely could not be bargained with, and more importantly, could not be burned down. So, they built in stone. Take a look at that staggering number for a second, 11. That is the thickness, in feet, of the solid sandstone walls of the Norman Great Keep that was raised in the 12th century. 11 feet of impenetrable stone standing 7 stories high. This was definitely not designed to be some cozy royal residence. No, this was a dark, brooding declaration of power carved directly into the rock. It was a giant warning sign to the Scots and the rebellious northern earls that essentially said, "This land is ours and nothing is gonna move us." And for 300 years, it was the ultimate backstop of English military power.
But inevitably, the crown's attention drifted southwards, towards France and London, and that political shift dragged our unassailable castle right into the most savage civil war England had ever seen, the Wars of the Roses. It was this beautifully complex, completely merciless dynastic blood feud. By 1464, the Yorkists had largely won the war, but a desperate, stubborn garrison of Lancastrian loyalists chose Bamburgh for their final doomed stand.
Section 3, the day walls crumbled, the 1464 siege.
Which pulls us right back into that frozen, gritty mud of 1464. Standing right outside the walls was the Yorkist Earl of Warwick, famously known as the Kingmaker. He brought with him the full, crushing military might of the crown, along with the most terrifying new weapons in the Western world. And Warwick did something nobody had ever done before in England. He didn't just want to besiege the castle, he prepared to completely bombard it out of existence. Before a single shot was even fired, he unleashed sheer psychological terror. He delivered this chilling ultimatum to the defenders. Quote, "The damage to the king's property would be paid for in Lancastrian blood." He promised that for every single cannon shot fired at the royal walls of Bamburgh, one defending man inside would be executed. I mean, it's just elegant. Absolute brutality.
But the defenders actually refused to surrender, and so the guns began to speak. The massive bombardment cannons they brought to the siege were so huge, so significant, they actually gave them names: Newcastle, London, Dijon. And as these enormous mechanical monsters roared, the deafening artillery slowly cracked the centuries-old honey-colored stone. Those mighty towers that had literally laughed at Viking axes and Scottish sieges, they groaned, fractured, and just collapsed into dust.
When the smoke finally cleared, Bamburgh had achieved a really grim new title. It became the very first English castle to be blown apart by gunpowder. Not starved out over a year, not scaled with wooden ladders, blown apart. The age of the impregnable stone castle, the architecture that had defined absolute power for 4 centuries, was served its permanent death notice right here on this very rock.
Section 4. Ruin and Victorian Rebirth. The welfare state and the inventor. Following that violent shattering, Bamburgh just fell into a long, 200-year silence. It passed through various hands, getting slowly consumed by the relentless, freezing Northumbrian weather. But history can pivot in entirely unexpected ways. After centuries of just rotting into a picturesque, romantic ruin, Bishop Nathaniel Crewe took ownership in the 18th century. And within the crumbling, blood-stained walls of this ancient war machine, Crewe established a radically progressive proto-welfare state. Seriously, he built a free school for local children, a granary for famine relief, a surgery for the sick. They even set up an early coast guard, using telescopes to watch for shipwrecks, and literally stored brandy and surgical tools right down on the beach. A site of ancient slaughter quietly transformed into one of the most progressive, life-saving institutions in the entire north of England. It's a crazy shift.
But the most fascinating chapter? That arrived in 1894, when the castle was bought by Lord William Armstrong. And there's a really dark, quiet poetry to his legacy here. Armstrong was arguably the most powerful arms manufacturer in the world at the time. He built his vast fortune on the exact same artillery technology that had blown Bamburgh to pieces 4 centuries earlier. Yet this titan of Victorian industry poured his immense wealth into resurrecting this broken ruin. The man who armed the world spent his final years rebuilding the fortress that weapons had destroyed, turning it into a lavish, living home.
And finally, Section 5. The Fortress Eternal. Watching, remembering, enduring. When you stand in the shadow of this massive castle today, you can literally feel the immense density of its history. 1,500 years of human triumph and absolute catastrophe live inside those stones. They hold the memories of Celtic warlords, Northumbrian monks, the Viking torch, the shattering blow of Yorkist cannons, and the grinding gears of Victorian industry. It truly is the castle that has died more than once and absolutely stubbornly refused to stay dead. It's been a royal capital, a ruined symbol of a lost cause, a radical welfare institution, and a grand private home. Whatever the next 15 centuries bring, whatever new storms or wild technologies arrive to reshape our world, you can be certain that this massive rock and its unyielding walls are going to continue to endure. Stories like Bamburgh's really remind us that the past is never actually dead. It's just waiting to be uncovered. So I want to leave you with a question to ponder. What is the most overlooked historical castle that you think deserves this kind of deep dive? Let me know, because there is always more hidden history waiting in the shadows, and the story doesn't end here.